there's certain things that I feel like we absolutely, as entrepreneurs, we have to pull the trigger on bringing somebody in. And I would argue, even if the person that you bring in will only be 70% as good as you would be, or as some other US, like if you took the time to really interview and get just the right person, like there are a lot of things that can be done in your business at 70% and are still way better than not doing it at all.
Oh, for sure. 100% agree. And so here's the approach that I take to this. And I mean, I don't think I've got it all figured out, but this is kind of where I'm leaning. And I've made some progress is if I have a process down where I think it's, probably a 70, 80, 90% solution, I look for a way to hand that off to somebody, whether that, it depends on the level of complexity. So, I have a marketing coordinator that, she's the one that schedules, kind of every one of our projects of, who needs to do what. So if we need a graphic designer, or we need a video editor, or we need a content writer, and making sure that that content gets edited, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I don't need to be doing that. I have a system in place for all that stuff, and she does a fantastic job of it. So then I can focus on doing those things where, either they're at a strategic level or they're experiments. Hey,
Right.
And just like the media placement experiment that I talked about, there's a lot of nuance in that, and there's a lot of things that can go, unexpected things to happen. To where if it's somebody that's not working, 20 to 40 hours a week solely with your company that you have regular contact with, it's hard to expect them to pick up that ball and really understand what the end goal is. And there's a ton of small decisions that get made in there where you may end up with something very unintended.
And you have also the situation where, like, all of those little decisions, right?
Yep.
Like you got two pieces there that are really critical that can derail that process. One is, are they competent enough to actually make those decisions and move the ball forward? And two, are they confident enough that they are competent enough to make those decisions without coming to you and clarifying every little thing, in which case then you might as well have just been doing it yourself.
Right. Well, and to go back on that, I think the other thing is it also depends on, like, how important is this to my business? Because there's a number of small things that, I tell my employees all the time, like, we are going to test things. And sometimes those tests go fantastic and we learn something out of it, and we have another tool in the toolbox, or we make a process, 10 times better. And sometimes they don't work out. And if it's something that's not critical to the business, and a lot of times I'll just say, hey, we'll have a discussion about the problem. We'll talk together about possible solutions. And we'll test a couple of those solutions. And I'll let them do the implementation, because at the end of the day, if we get another 10% out of it, fantastic. But the reality of it is that I'm not going to put my brain power into actually executing on that. And it makes way more sense to have them do it. And most of the time, they do a really good job, and now they own more of that process.
Right. Well, and they learned something out of it, I mean, and if nothing else, they learned I'm capable of implementing some of these things, and it's okay if I screw it up. Like sometimes it's useful for them to learn that it's actually okay that I fail, right? Like, it's one thing for John to tell me that it's okay if I take this thing over and I make some decisions on it and it goes south, and he's told me it's okay if it goes south, right? It's a whole different ball game at the end of that process when it does go south, for John to say, yeah, no, that's cool, it's okay, we'll either we'll try again, or we're not going to worry about it. I'm not going to beat you up over it. You learned something. I learned something.
What did we learn out of it?
Forward.
Fantastic.
Right?
Okay, we learned something.
But they don't know that until they actually screw it up and get to interact with John, and see how that process actually transpires, right?
Yep. Well, and I think that's one of the things, that I try to do a good job of as well, of even realizing with the processes, that we have in place that are very solid, that, 5 to 10% of the time, those processes are going to get screwed up. things are going to go sideways. And, I'm not perfect. So why would I look for my employees to be perfect? But are we hitting that mark, 90, 95% of the time? That's what I really care about, because everybody has a bad day.
Yep.